again, thank you guys for having me. And we're going to be talking about the smart handoff, which pointing up with what you said, this relationship between design and development is just such a key part of our everyday existence as designers and as people in a company. So, ooh, there you go. So, for the people who don't know me, I'm Joe. I have currently 20 years in doing design, 2 decades of this, which means that's 2 decades of people having to hear me talk about design. And reluctantly, as some of them have fought me off on talking. Like we mentioned before, I work at Handoff, which is an ad agency here in New York. Working with some great clients, doing some really fun work and having the ability to really push the limits of what I feel like I'm capable of from every day. And fun fact, in 20 years, my first agency job. Who would have guessed? Took that long. And back 20 years ago, if I never worked in an agency, you would never work in an agency. That's what I was told. But guess what, kids? Dreams can happen. On top of that, I have had the pleasure to build creative teams. And I have built 5 extremely large creative teams for some big clients like American Express and some smaller boutique agencies. Well, agencies is a loose term, internal agencies, and of course, for some smaller companies. For me, the work has always been the most rewarding part, and bringing people together to work together as like a family is kind of just one of the benefits. And that's usually my biggest piece of art that I always give back to, or biggest piece of creative I give back to a company, is the team of misfits that make some of their best products. My favorite thing to say, my hipsterness. I was doing UX before it was UX. Back in the early 2000s, build websites in Flash and action scripting and ridiculous stuff that now when you look at it, you're like, why though? And 15 years into my career, I tried to get a job doing UX, and somebody was like, you're not a UX designer, you don't know UX. And I'm like, yeah, no, everything you're asking me to do, I did years ago. Where's your wireframes? What's a wireframe? Where's your initial drawing? And I pull out my notebook with some cryptic ass writing on it. And that was my wireframe. So I learned, like the rest of us, how the evolution of UX kind of was that carry on from being a designer and being a web designer, for lack of a better term. So also, I am disturbingly upbeat and happy. And if you've ever worked with me, you've seen me at 8 a.m., most likely this happy. And unfortunately for me, it's always been that way. This disturbingly maniacal smile has started from, look at how dark my hair was. Can we just take a minute? Because even when I pulled this photo, even I forgot my hair was that brown. Like, that's crazy. And to be fair, I don't wear ties anymore because constricting. So what is a smart handoff? So whenever I've done this talk and talked to people about it, one of the things that people always keep asking me is SMART an acronym? Because I work in tech and corporate people think everything's an acronym. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So I always say, of course it is. Like, why wouldn't it be? So I just don't tell them what it actually means. I think spicy meat and rice tacos are delicious. For I know somebody right now is waiting on a burrito from the team because they were waiting for the event to start. But it could be something as set meaningful, ambitious rules today. I don't know. That sounds like some kind of weird haiku that like you'd find inside like a fortune cookie. But it's I tell them it's an acronym, but I never tell them what it means. And I think that's kind of the benefit of it, because then it's just this air of mystery that the creative people have. So yeah, so it's an acronym. But this is what we're going to talk about. the key of everything when it comes to being a person in an office, just fucking communicate with each other. It's the groundwork for everything. And it's something that if you've worked in an office before and you've said, hey, yo, we'll get a cup of coffee, which I know everybody's just like, oh, he said coffee. Said on the New York bingo card, I'm not sure. Like you go and you ask a coworker, like, yo, I'm gonna grab coffee, you wanna go? And there's certain people that are in that office that'll be like, I'll come with you. The truly easy one. The other person may be like, you know what? Yeah, just get me because I'm a New Yorker, venti pike. Don't worry, I have sugar. Just put a splash of milk. And then there's like the far end, which is, oh my God, yes. Can I have a triple venti? No foam, no whip. Half calf, full calf, sprinkles, cappuccino. And you're just like, oh, what? What does any of those words? Can you write it down for me? Oh, you weren't writing it down? No, I wasn't writing it down. But still, we have to work with these three types of people in our offices. So being able to communicate with them is always a key thing. By the way, never got a coffee order wrong in 20 years of working. I might have forgotten my own coffee when I went out for a run, but that's a whole other thing. So when it comes to that communication, we got these two amazingly happy human beings. We have a designer and a developer. So the first thing we're going to do as a part of communication is spend time together. So anybody out there have a really close relationship with their developers at work? Feel free to say yes. Yell out, who?
My husband is a developer, if that counts.
So let's get much closer than that. So George, I got to ask a very important question. Is it difficult to be married to a developer being a designer because you feel like they judge how you build your components?
He keeps things very, very simple. And I'm definitely more of like, I like the flair and the, you know, just the overall design of things. But he's just like, as long as there's a button I can click, I'm good, you know?
One of my favorite things about developers, there's many types of developers in the realm, and there's some that like know UX super well and they like try to help you out and like bring ideas back. And then there's ones that are just like, do I have to code a button? Yeah, code a button. Just pull from the design system. But you know, button 4. All right, cool. So the problem with sometimes when you're in an office environment is you have these two people that are working together, but then the org says, come on, there they are, the people that get between you. You got maybe a client, may have some management, product owner, stakeholders that say, listen, nerds, you can't talk to each other. You have to run what you have to say through us. And have this whole game of telephone where all I want to say is, hey, I really want to make these buttons with like a 25 pixel radius. Is that easy? Is that going to break the system? So these lovely people who we all work with and we love care deeply for, sometimes are a bottleneck. So what you have to do is really have a solid communication, even with them, and saying, I understand you want to be a part of this. I appreciate your time, but I really hope that I can just talk to my developer and get some of these ironed out. I'll throw it in Slack so everybody knows, and we'll be good. Most of them go for it. Could also be because I'm super loud and cuddly looking and non-threatening and possibly threatening. So we have these two lovely people and they're going to be working together, and we're going to have to go through a little bit of the ins and outs of what's really going to help. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to manage those timelines. Everybody's time's important in work, right? I don't know if anybody's had the pleasure of seeing these beautiful graphs. The lovely flowcharts of Agile. So this is kind of just a thrown together best case scenario, because look how much design time I gave us. We all know that we don't get that much design time. And testing. This is my dream. So, and I give a lot of QA time because I feel like we would have time to really go through an experience. But when we manage these timelines and we start talking to each other and we're getting our plan together, right? We have to figure out, everybody asks me, when's the best time to bring the developer in? Here, there, and at the end, of course, because we got to celebrate the eventual launch. This is a conversation that doesn't end from the beginning. When you're a UX designer and you're coming up with components, working with a team, bringing them in super early is such an important part of that flow. And then as you're iterating, iterate with them. Much like I said to Georgia and her husband, like it's a thing that, like, if I'm sure if they're working on a project together, which may be tumultuous inside like the household, especially during COVID, somehow somebody's getting yelled at for not taking the garbage out. But it's that idea of constant iteration and constant thought. Like, some of my now best friends are my developers that I worked with on a job, because it was having that flow of ideas and that respect for each other's craft, and the ability that I can go at them and be like, I want to do this, it's gonna be amazing, and they're like, I have 4 story points. You can't do that. Best you can do is put an image there. But if I have an embedded video code, don't push your luck. So, and that's the beauty of all of this. It's like, as you guys manage your timelines, you figure out what you're doing from the start. You know, like, if you've worked in an agile environment, everything is based off of timing. Everything is based off of how you work together and what you do in this time and how it's important. And, you know, you got to manage expectation. Trust me, we all want to go and build the coolest, most interactive, deep fucking AR shit inside a WebKit. We do. But guess what? It's for a pizza place. It's not going to work. You know, like, it's one of those things. So, by the way, you guys got me thinking about pizza. So after you do all that, you got to align on those features. So we're doing all this groundwork where the handoff becomes such a fluid element, where we talk about what we do and how we do it, and we're all on the same page. So as we align on stuff, like, I want to make this thing mad responsive. My developers, of course, going to be down for that, because they know our stakeholders, who may or may not know well, say, oh yeah, no, it'll be good. And then you say mobile first, and they're like, what? Whole other thing. But what if I want to throw in a fancy chatbot, because I feel like customer service is going to be part of it, and they're just like, where are you going to get the code for the chatbot? And I say, I don't know, magic. Isn't there one there already? And then they ask me, have you looked at the site? No, I don't even know what I'm working on. But I think that's the thing, is we have big ideas, and it's okay to take those no's and say, all right, it makes sense that why they're saying no. Because they're never going to say no if it's something they want to build. And I think that's also part of that. This whole, like, realm of communication is about, we all want to build cool stuff. The developers, I remember going to developers and having this, like, amazing idea and getting them all amped up for it, and they got super excited. Has anybody ever gone to a developer with, like, this crazy idea, and they got super amped up, and then you find out that, like, we have no money and we have no means?
All the time.
All the time. See? And I think that's the thing, because your developers appreciate the fact that you want to push the envelope. Do you think they want to be building the same button 1,000 times over? Maybe. I don't know what their deal is. Maybe that's their thing. But odds are, you know, all of our jobs are always about essentially being the best version of ourselves while we're at a company. And that goes for designers, developers, product owners, leadership, if you got good leaders, because we all want to do the same. We all want to do great things. So then remember that fancy little video component I wanted to add, he's down for it. He was like, nah, man, don't worry about it. We have a video player that we haven't used in such a long time. We could use it now. By the way, if you have time to make friends with a developer, learn all the reusable components they have in React and find out which ones they don't use often. Because there's probably some hidden gold that some UX designer made them build for like a test or like a landing page that went live for a month, but now there's just a component sitting there. There's sometimes hidden gold in these deep-seated libraries in some companies. So now, when we start doing all this and we start reviewing our work to reduce blockers, anybody in Agile knows it's one of the key things of Agile is they ask you the question, any blockers? And if you're on a good team, you say no blockers, which is great because everybody's working and everything's moving great. But I'll tell you, I wish I had some blockers because that means I have some downtime. So I can like really reset and think things through. But I've been lucky enough to have people that I'm constantly saying no blockers. So when we go through a lot of this and we understand our timeline and we work through a lot of like our process and what we're doing as a team and what we're doing as a whole, right? And how we're working together, we have to start really examining like what our limitations are as a team, like going through those issues of figuring out where we can be crazy and where somebody, product owner, probably maybe some management has to grab that leash and pull us back and be like, listen, I don't know what you're thinking, but that is not what we have time for. And that is not that's not our business strategy, my favorite term in the world. All right, I get it. But then we have to always, in all of this, responsibility is such a thing. Ownership is a term that's getting pushed on us. And it's great because it keeps us doing the best work we can because we know we're responsible for it. And I think it's such an interesting dynamic to start as you have younger designers who are out there. Are there any young designers out there, kind of first year, second year, or sorry, as the
recent graduate?
Recent graduate. Or if you're job posting, do we have any junior designers with 5 years experience? Because that's apparently a thing that exists out there. Go figure.
That's my biggest issue right now.
We could talk about that. We got plenty of time. Because it is a thing of, even when you're a junior designer and you're in or a UX designer or whatever terminology we use, and you're in a job and we give you ownership of a project because we feel like you're up to it and you can own it. It's such a great lesson because it's so much more than what you would think it's going to be. What else do I got here? Iteration. We got a lot of this is UX. Iteration is our game. If you ever designed something and you were done on the first round, you didn't iterate on it at all because there's no way. None of us are that good. If we were all that good, we would probably be moderately okay with money because UX designers are not well regarded as other celebrities inside the creative world. But I think that's the beauty of it, is, and iterating comes from not just the design team. It hits that development team, the product team. You can go, and if you have an idea and you have somebody who might be in your user set, go talk to Maureen in accounting. She might be the demographic that'll be using that product. She may be useless, but sometimes people who have no stake in the game give you the best insights because it's on-site user testing. we can literally get information from anybody. There may have been a time that I may have stood in a park with like a laptop asking people to look at some experience. Non-threatening, cuddly. That's why it worked. But I think that's the beauty of it. And also, I live in New York. People just tell me to get away. It's fine. I don't care. I should have just set up like a hot dog cart and would have got some better insights. But I think that's the thing, is that you can use what you have. And again, like when we have those super tight timelines and you can't run a full usability session, make the most out of what you got, and also stress test it against those developers. You know, you can always, they're always going to be open to talk to you about what they're doing. Because remember, it affects them too. And then give them a high five. One of my favorite social experiments inside a large corporation, and I'll even say the name, it was Amex. I walked through the streets, walked through the halls of Amex. Anybody remembers what an office looks like? Completely crowded corporate building. Just walking around my laptop, put my hand up. Random people would high five me. So one of the product owners that with me said, "What are you doing? Did you know them?" No. If you put your hand up, they'll high five you. Joe, it's not going to happen. 3 floors. 3 floors, I randomly high five people. I'm probably the start of the coronavirus. Who knows? Because I high fived all those randos. But it's just a fun little experiment, and you should always, you know, have that type of connection with your developers. If you're on a video call because, you know, the world's ending, you high five your camera. Because guess what? That's always going to work. It gives you some kind of sense of connection. And when you get all this stuff done, it's time to go to dev. It's time for them to start their process, which means we really have to go into that handoff and go into what happens. So here they are. It's getting close to the end of the line. The designer is looking pretty weary, and he talks to the developer. We had a whole conversation in our land of communication, talking about what do you need? My favorite question to ask somebody, because you never know what answer you're going to get. Asking a developer, what do you need to succeed? It brings up the question. Well, what can you give me? This is like, it's a relationship. It's asking about what we're having for dinner tonight. Like, tell me what you want. So we say, we have this. I have Zeppelin, Envision, give you specs in Envision, Adobe XD. I'm like one of the 5 people who use Adobe XD. I can give you specs in that. I have this really sick ass program for Sketch and Figma called Anima. It'll actually give you fucking React code. Trust me, it makes your life easier. You got React code. And then they're just like, you trying to do my job? No. I did development in the early 2000s. It sucked. I want nothing to do with that again. And then Figma, amongst other, there's tons of other tools. There's plugins aplenty. At one point I was hosting my own stash area with Sketch Export, just seeing how it works. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, how about this? I can give you a good old-fashioned Photoshop document, redlined. For anybody who's old enough and PTSD'd enough to understand what redlining is, this was a process that we gave developers, a flattened file with all this documentation on it, and they couldn't do shit with it. They had to guess. All they knew were where everything kind of sat. Didn't know font styles, didn't know spacing or padding really that well. And we made do. And then if you show your developer this, they'll cry a little because nobody wants to deal with this. So then we go into our fancy new programs. Like this is, for everybody who knows, this is Figma. This is their inspect area. You show them this and say, so here's what I got. You can click on something, you get colors. I can show you how big the images are. I can tell you the font families. You can pull CSS. You can have the mobile breakpoints. You have everything available to you. Sounds great, right? And you can download the images straight from here. So everything you have is in this area. So hopefully he likes it. And that's the thing, is that stress test these against your developers. This doesn't have to come at the end. This could come in the beginning. You just have to show them what you're gonna give them and then walk them through it. Don't just send them a Figma link and be like, bro, here it is. They're gonna be like, oh great, I have a prototype. You know, it's so much more about explaining your tools, like going through all the steps that are here, like even showing them, hey, you want to see how my module is created? It's right under, it's all collapsed in. You can click on it, you could see what's inside. Another thing goes without saying, I know it's kind of like a unicorn thing that people have out there. Name your layers. We all say we want to do it. We all try to do it. But what ends up happening is like the key layer on top is labeled and then it's just chaos below. There's a reason why this is important. Not just because you don't want to torture the next designer that picks it up. That's just being normal. The reason why you want to do this is it helps the developers. And if you have access to their module library or you've built modules with them, label the module as the component. So they'll see that this is, you know, text box 4, 3, whatever. You know, and this is also helps that this is all that communication. Once you guys are on the same page everywhere, it's just going to lead to more productivity. It's going to lead to having a timeline that could be stretched out. And it also helps the developers understand this is what they're going to get. So now their story points are more realistic. And then that mythical, magical timeline I had with all that design stuff, we can design for like 4 sprints and have a user testing flow in the middle. That makes that more possible because everybody knows from the start of this conversation, we're on the same page. And we're going to be working side by side to create the best product for our companies. So they seem to be working together. Let's say 90% of the time, I take my developers out once I hand off files just to really get them drunk, just to hear like what they really think about the files. But that's just me. That's not really a best practice thing. That's more of just a kind courtesy. Make sure that they're still a live practice. And the reason why that this level of camaraderie, this level of communication, this level of care that has to go into all of our work and into this scope is because you want your job to be easier. They want their job to be easier. And we both have to kind of work to make each other's life easier. And it's gonna just lead to better product. And like I said, having that iteration time is healthy because even if, remember, they're looking at our UX slightly differently than how we look at it. Obviously, outside looking in, always a good thing to have. But they're looking at it from a technical perspective. And if the chance you have a developer that has a great UX eye, that's just an extra person to kind of bang ideas off of. Like, think about it. Like, you have an extra person on top of your design team and the people around you. And it's great to have more minds because it's just going to lead to better creative and better experiences. So, what did we learn so far? I blew through that in 40 minutes. I'm very, very impressed very quickly. I don't know how I did it. We have plenty of time to talk now, but we're going to spend time together, right? This whole relationship is about understanding each other. Manage your timelines, because there's nothing more important than getting things done on time and getting them done possibly early. If there's any product owners here, we don't get things done early. Align on the feature so you guys know where your roadmap's going to be and what you can do and what you can build. And I think that's such a great part of it. And all that reduces blockers. So we work in harmony and we work productively and we work fast. And then you hand off at the end. Then it's time for handoff. And despite my best efforts, I fucking built an acronym for it. Who would have guessed? But that's the thing, like all of these parts are such an important part of the whole. And remember, all you got to do with somebody is fucking communicate. It all starts and ends with that. So looks like the chat's bumping. I'm going to try to close out Zoom because I'm horrible at this because that stupid menu never works correctly. There you go. Let's see what we got in the chat. Let's see, we got tons of, wow, we got questions for days. And we got some laughing. And we got somebody from the Adirondacks, which is even better. That's upstate, or I think it's still upstate. I don't know. Whenever I say upstate, somebody from upstate New York is just like, it's not upstate, it's Western New York. Same shit. So, all right, what do we got?
It looks like we have a question here. Someone asks, so I guess not so much about communication with the developers, but more internally in their design team. Sounds like this person's somewhat more of a senior designer. They're saying that trying to work with 3 people that come from a boot camp. In the past, they were working with some boot camp grads that were what they considered good designers, but they're finding more often, at least with these 3 designers, that they're not really caring about the real world effects. They just want to come up with some imagination from their mind, not consider like actual user benefit. Any advice how to work with this type of designer?
Absolutely. You know who that type of designer is? Me. I'm just kidding. No, it's so in all of what we do, it always is targeted to who's on the other end of the screen. We all want to do cool shit. It's unavoidable. We want to have those pie in the sky ideas. We want to have pieces for our portfolio that somebody will look at and be like, oh, damn. But you have to be realistic. And when you talk to them, you have to show them what the goal of this journey is. If the goal of the journey, like I said before, joking around, like I want to do something crazy and it's for a local pizza place, which is not a complete lie. During COVID, I went to an Italian restaurant over here, went and made amazing menus for them because we were supposed to, throw away menus. Then I made a QR code reader with it, made this crazy ass web experience for it. And the owner looked at me and goes, what am I supposed to do with this? And I said, no, super easy. He goes, Joe, you know what my clientele is? I said, people who like food. He goes, no, my clientele is 50 and over. And I said, oh shit, can't get that on a track phone. Like, okay then, paper menus it is. But that's the thing, is that I went and big because I wanted to do something for somebody in my community and make this crazy ass experience that was super modern and ready to go. And it was for the wrong user. So granted, no waste of time. I'm here, I don't sleep, I got nothing but time, but it was a mistake. And I think that's the thing. If I knew who the audience was, and I knew what I'm supposed to be doing, and I knew where I'm supposed to be going, I would have done it correctly first. Probably would have made the font on the menus a little bigger too, but that's a whole other thing. But that's where you have to know. And if they are so destined to create some kind of crazy, like out of the box thinking for something that doesn't need out of the box thinking, they have to be brought back down and say, is this what they would use? And I think, again, and this all goes back to communication, because I think when you have people with big ideas, it's very difficult sometimes to tear them back down to reality. You can, and you have to be a little persistent. But luckily, we have numbers to back everything up. We have data, we have user interviews, we have everything in the world to say, like, listen, this is what it says. This is what they want. Save your big ideas when you go interview at Spotify. Like, it is a tough thing, especially working in a team, because it's, especially when one person gets like somebody on the bandwagon. Oh, hell yeah, we should do that. Fuck, it's three against one. What am I gonna do? Am I gonna be the voice of reason? You don't have to worry about that, because you just have a whole bunch of data that'll back you up, which always outranks numbers of people in a room.
Thank you. Yeah. That answers that. It looks like there's some continuation of this conversation in the chat. Basically, it sounds like these particular three designers are almost adverse to personas. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a challenge at all, but like people that like don't believe in personas, I've heard that, and I'm sure you have as well. Like sometimes it's like these personas are just too cooked up and not based in reality. I think that's a little bit what you're talking about with data. Like hopefully, depending on the maturity of the organization, the personas are actually defined by actual user cohorts versus like completely blue sky.
Oh yeah, no, I've definitely seen some personas that were very, I would never say no to a persona, but I would definitely be suspect of a persona.
Yeah.
I'd be like, this person's too good to be true. This person does everything we need to hit. Like, but it's still, there should be enough within a persona to develop to that, that pie in the sky idea is too far. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's one of the things. And again, when it comes to personas, I think do we have any solid UX researchers in the house? You could either raise your hand, yell out, "Oh no, that's me."
I do a fair amount of research.
Excellent. So you know how important it is and the time you spend on building personas, and you're right now going like, this guy don't think personas are real. How do you find the way to not have a full-on pie in the sky persona that is grounded in some sort of reality? The one that doesn't check all the boxes, but checks some of the boxes.
Yeah, I do a sort of combination. I don't always use personas. Sometimes I call them archetypes. Sometimes they just all focus on different things depending on what we're building. So a lot of times it's like, what are the key tasks? What are the different kinds of users? For me, it's like a very flexible tool that depends a lot on like, what is it you're actually building? So it's not like, here's a magic person using our product, but like, here's a problem that users encounter. Here's a task people have to accomplish. Here's, here's like our older user base that is going to have a different set of problems than a younger user base, or, and it's like, it's not always about demographics. It's not always about tasks they have to accomplish. And sometimes I make a lot of different types. Sometimes it's like, I'll make personas that are focused on challenges people have, but then I'll make user stories, which are more task focused. So it's sort of, filling out these different, like models that float around in order to make sure you're like, okay, are we missing anything? Do we know what these are actually addressing? Are they useful for, guiding us in our building?
And that's great. And it's great that you put the time in to do that, because it does create a lot more of a grounded reality for us to start building designs off of. And as we all know, and I'm sure you are very, very used to hearing the trials and tribulations of user testing. You build this persona based off of these ideas and these journeys, and this is how they're going to react. Then you go to user testing and they're just like, nah, B, that's not how it's going to work. I don't like any of this. Or they are not engaging in navigation, even though, most of the people that fit into that core group will engage in navigation because that's how they find their way of you know, of getting through sites or sites experiences. So also for anybody who has gone through user testing remotely, that's a lot of fun. This is also my new COVID things I've dealt with in COVID. Was remote user testing. Never did it before. I'm not sure if everybody else has a lot of experience doing remote user testing, but for anybody who knows me, I am the guy behind the glass inside a user testing room that you could still hear my voice through the glass. So I kind of missed it. I preferred them hearing me yell at them through the glass. But it is such a different experience of how we do our jobs. And I think this is not something I was planning on going into, but I think it translates well. Like, I talked a lot about communication. I talked a lot about how we work together. And now more than ever, as we're all remote and we're in some instances all over the world, because once COVID hit, people, it's like a free for all. I'm going to go here now. I don't have to be in New York. We still have to maintain. We still have to maintain that communication. You still have to make time. Like, we have great tools like Slack, and if you're using it, Microsoft Teams, and you should use it as a tool of your everyday life. And I think I've been in more Slack calls now than ever before. I actually didn't even know that actual button worked for real. And then it came to the point that during some of our COVID time, in the beginning especially, we would try to emulate parts of our regular everyday interactions. And one of my favorite interactions during the day was when we were leaving a meeting and you would have that conversation, the walking conversation. By the way, I have a standing desk, so every day is like a TED talk with me when I'm walking around here. That conversation that you'd have as you walk back to your desk, that's gone essentially when we're all like, all right, Zoom, peace, beep, and then what we started to do is I would chime up a Slack call. I'd be like, yo, who wants to go take a Slack walk? Because I had to have some kind of branding around it. He'd be like, oh yeah, let's do it. Bang, hit the button, and people joined in. Whoever joined in would join in. Excellent. Then we continue the conversation as we would technically walk to our next meeting, which we were almost likely late for because we all had to be there together. But it still helped emulate that level of communication, that level of quick iteration that we would do that we lost while we were remote. So now when I'm still trying to interact with developers, and now I'm interacting, being an agency, I'm interacting with developers I've never met before. So all the groundwork that we talked about is so much more important. So much more important? Yeah, that was English, sure. Because they have to know who I am. I have to know who they are. I have to know what their tech stack is. I have to know what their CMS is. I have to know, listen, can I build new components? Like, how do you build new components? Show them Figma right off the bat. And they go, all right, this will work. Build the design system. Has anybody on the call built the design system yet? Like, soup to nuts. Yeah.
I took the mute off. I have a little bit, playing around with it a bit. Actually just came from a call.
Oh, Frankie.
Comes right before this.
And it's such a great exercise in, for anybody lack of a better term, atomic design. I don't know if anybody read the Atomic Design book, or just browse the Wikipedia page for it, because kind of what I did. But it does, and for a designer to build the design system, it literally gives you an idea on how everything is built, which is how React components are built, which is amazing because that's what everybody codes in for the most part, or Vue or Angular or whatever. But it does teach you how to go from small to big. And again, that's all part of that understanding of what we do every day. You know, Michelle said you built one too. Right.
I felt not, I guess, on a smaller scale, like not for a full suite of products or anything like that, but I've been on projects before where we're sort of starting from scratch brand wise and creating a whole new system for what will happen going forward, sort of like designing a few pages of a future site as Neuron and then giving it to their team to roll out across everywhere else. So trying to equip their team with the tools that they would need to actually do that without having to come back to us once a week to ask questions.
And that's a lot of also when you hand off those files, what you want to avoid is let them run with it.
Mhm.
Like they can come and ask questions whenever they want, but like you want to limit the amount of churn. Oop, agile word. I feel like I should have built a drinking game around cursing and agile words. But that's the thing, right? Like it's much like how if you work in a good design team and then you're working on a large project, there's somebody building a component library for us. Back in, when everybody was only using Sketch like a year ago, because it feels like forever ago, there was somebody who housed the Sketch library, right? They would build all the components so we can just drag and drop and go happy and, build whatever we need and be fast. It's that same mentality. So there's somebody doing that for us to make our jobs easier, and we got to continue to pay it forward to the developers to make their jobs easier. For anybody who's had to build a Sketch component library, that's a lot of fun. We could talk about that forever, especially before pre-adjustable components and then post-adjustable components when like afterwards you're like, oh my God, all 14 of those components could have just been one. But that's a whole other thing. They're making our job so easy. But with that, I think it's a lot of our jobs is always going to be about obviously innovating, but it's also innovating our workflow. Like one of the most, I would say, underrated skills that is the next 1,000 titles that we'll build out is design ops. DevOps, it's a whole thing. We've known about it for a while. They've been doing it for a while. We kind of went and said, hey, we need that. We need process. We need understanding. And then a couple of us will just be like, hey, fuck it, I'll do it. We're design ops now? Perfect. But I think it's so important that we all understand that part of the job too. Like, I get it. Our jobs are now getting complicated as shit. Being a graphic designer back in like 2006 was a dream compared to now. I had to worry about one thing, was making it pretty, sending it to a printer with the least amount of problems. But back then, the printers, it's the same thing as a developer. You'd have to go meet with your printer and be like, listen, I'm going to hand off this package to you. It's going to have your fonts, your images, your layouts, a PDF just in case that you can't fuck up. And they run a press. And guess what? Because I didn't talk to them about how their presses run, everything has a deep blue tint. And then I'm just like, hey guys, this looks like shit. In a pleasant way, a loving way. And they'd be like, well, oh yeah, sorry, we forgot to tell you our printers run a little blue. Little blue. All right. So how am I going to fix this? Oh, we have a profile set for it in our printer. Or we'll give it to you and you can drop it right into your InDesign file and it'll adjust everything the way it needs to go. Didn't feel like that was a need to tell me now. Like a week ago, and we set this job, got the quotes, got the whole thing. Fine. But it's that conversation. So then make that mistake once, never again. So now every time I met with a printer, I'd say like, hey, you guys have a set printer settings? Do your blacks run true black? Do I have to do a 20% hit blue in the blacks or whatever? And they'd be like, oh yeah. Smooth process. I can go on press, have no problems. Still to this day, I still hold those same kind of values, for lack of a better term, with dealing with developers. And that goes for everywhere, even overseas where think about it. We're literally building a process that transcends language. because we're going to be handing off files that has their language built into it. If anybody's used Anima on the plugin for Sketch and Figma and all of that, you have to pay for it, big deal. We have to pay for a lot of shit that goes on that we don't want to pay for. Adobe finally got me to pay for Creative Cloud after using it for so many years. It also, again, is information for us to look at that handoff, look at that file that's created and see what's in there, see how the React components are built. And again, biggest question I get, do UX designers need to know how to code? No. If you want to code, be a fucking developer. Don't do two jobs. What's the term? Jack of all trades, master of none? Like stick it, like, I hate to use the term stay in your lane, but stay in your lane. Like, be amazing at UX. And as everybody knows, UX is broken out into 1,000 fucking things anyway. Be amazing at UX research. Be amazing at UX design. Be somebody who prototypes the shit out of stuff. Like, pick and choose your lane and go for it. It's great to know everything, but you don't have to be a master at all of it. Anybody who knows me knows my research end of UX is horrendous. I am working very hard at trying to be better at it. I get very distracted as I read data. So I just focus in on one piece of data and I just, but that's the thing. It's when you look at these handoffs and you hand them off to people, you can hand it off to anyone as long as it's their job to hand it off to. Do not hand it off to anybody in marketing. They're going to look at it, have no idea what's going on, wonder why it doesn't move and call it a day. But I think it's one of the spots where we really have to kind of polish our end up of our job. And I think it's good. It starts, like, again, you start out in UX, you're not going to be great at this. This is all comes in time. And don't be too hard on yourself when you hand something off to a dev and they come back and they ask questions. Always encourage questions. But if they say, like, oh, every other H tag is, every H2 is 30 pixels and this one H2 is 28, what happened?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. It's one of those things, right? Like, it's right away, you're just like, I fucked up. My boss is going to find out and be in trouble. Or if you work for me, Joe's going to give me production work. Like, it's not the end of the world. It sucks. You fix it. You send it out. Let your boss know, hey, they found a little error. You know, we're not splitting atoms here. This is not Pfizer. We are not coming out with any type of vaccine tomorrow. We are building product. So I've been seeing the persona conversation continuing in the chat. But I did see the question, which is where I started, is teams that won't let you and the devs talk. So I have fought this battle many, many times, and I have won almost all of them. I may have had to go slightly walk past the developer and be like, oh, my laptop's here. What do you think about that on my screen? You have to, open conversation. You can't do your work effectively if you have to play telephone. You could always offer the million ways of communication that we have. I'm going to shoot an email, CC you on it, call it a day. Because everybody loves getting that Outlook sound on their phone. Or you can say, I'll throw us in a Slack channel and you can just sit back and watch. Also viable. I think the idea is that as long as the people who want to stay in the know are in the know, as long as you are keeping them there, there's no way that they can be like, you didn't tell me. Nah, man, you there. You just didn't see the Slack. Or you can follow up with them. Or, yo, me and the dev are gonna go grab lunch. You wanna come with us? Because usually that's how I used to hide it too. Like, hey, we're gonna go grab we're gonna go grab some lunch, not talk shop about this project, both with our laptops. It's fine. Gonna get a sandwich. But I think that's the thing, is that remember to keep the people in the loop. Like, it's sometimes it's annoying and it's an extra step. And again, you could always meet up with a developer, have the conversation, and then post after and be like, hey, we just talked about this. Always keep it open. Hey guys, we talked about this. You know, we're both aligned with it. What does everybody else think? Because guess what? They probably have no real objections, because if you guys are aligned, there's no real discussion. You know, I think it's, in a perfect world, there's always somebody that's going to complain. There's always somebody. There's always somebody with that crazy Starbucks order. But I think it's, again, as long as you guys are being open, you guys are letting everybody know, you're golden. So what else we have? Oh, Alyssa. Hi. So much like, it's the same kind of question, like keeping the stakeholders involved and trying to make sure that, again, making them feel like they're part of the process. What we are, without using the term lightly, is like, we're evangelists for UX. We're evangelists for a team. Half because we're the chattiest people in the world, because we're so used to asking questions, but we always have to be open to talk about what we're doing. Our process at this point, despite our best efforts, is still very new for a lot of companies. That's why there's companies that specify and agencies that specify in UX, because it's something we still need to educate. And I think that's the thing, is working with stakeholders and working with other designers and making sure everybody kind of understands is a very big, like, burden we have to carry. It's a lot of that, like that pressure to make sure that everybody understands, but our jobs are not hard to understand. My favorite thing is when people are surprised when we come up with stuff. I don't know if anybody else has had this situation, because according to popular opinion, we are the ones who, no matter what our title is, we make the site pretty. It's their job. But then you come back with, like, in a meeting, oh, so I have this heat map and I've got the stakeholder information and I got all this data that I ended up getting from, like, this team and this team, and they're just like, why did you do all that work? It's my job. User experience. It's in the name. User experience. Well, I thought you just worked on, like, making the buttons blue. So, funny story, back in the day, they used to call the creative teams arts and crafts, because that's what they thought of us. They thought we were there just to glue sticks together, make it look generally pretty, and then call it a day. We're always going to be fighting that stigma of what we do and validating what we do. And I think that's, the more you work with a team and the more you explain, like, this is all part of what we do, the more it's going to feel more natural for them. I think, and again, going, especially UX designers and visual designers, like, there's been that divide where one's research and one's design. And when you have insight on design, sometimes visual designers will be like, yo, bro, I got it. It's fine. And you're like, but I just saw this site on Trends. Just sending it to you. Thought it was cool. And it's, again, it's the respect for what we all do is always a big thing. Oh, my favorite, Jordan. When you have a dev that pushes something to a staging site or any other site, and it comes up jacked the fuck up, and you're like, did you even look at what I sent you? So everything we do previously, up to the point of handing off, is to avoid the tools that we have basically give them all the ammo to build a perfect site, build the site. There's no perfect. There's always going to be something wrong because it's code. Code always ends up getting jacked up somewhere. If you have a developer that doesn't follow it, I've been in this position quite a few times, and it gets very frustrating. Remember, they're still human. Remember one of the key tent poles of being a UX designer, empathy. You know, it's so much easier to be like, you didn't do your job right. But it's also very easy to be like, so what didn't you understand? Pull that UX research power from your back. Ask those qualifying questions. You know, why is this image cropped that way? Don't you, and again, knowing how components are built is like a key part of it. Don't you float that image in the middle of the container? Would it be easier if I crop this image directly to size? Yeah, that would help me out a lot. Okay. Go in Sketch, export, you know, call it a day. It's I'm not gonna lie, it's frustrating as hell when you see a live site and it just looks like, you know, a GeoCities page from the 90s, if anybody's old enough to remember that. But it is also very easy to say, why did this happen? Like, what happened between me handing off and you receiving that fell apart? And I think it's definitely it's a little, what's the word I'm looking for? A test of our ability to work with other people. But you have to always remember, like, listen, our job is to get this done. Arguing about stuff doesn't get you anywhere. Listening and having a conversation goes miles. I feel like I'm very like squishy granola right now. Like, I'm very new age, which is not me by any stretch of the imagination.
I just offer, I think it was 2 months ago now, we had a talk by Tuti. I don't know how to say her last name, so I won't try, but she gave a talk on how to work with difficult people and also acknowledging, like, sometimes we are the difficult people. But I found that talk in sort of blog format, so I'm going to share that in the Slack channel, because I think, you know, when you're talking about squishy granola, I think it reminds me of Tuti's talk in that there's a lot of generosity for the other party involved in her approach to working with difficult people.
That's amazing. And again, also, like, as you guys know, there's events like this going on. There's so much information out there to help us all be better at our jobs and be a better teammate. Because I think that's also what it boils down to, is that, you know, when you take a job, even if you're a freelancer, most of the jobs I did my biggest development work with, I was a contractor. And nobody knew, because I acted like a regular employee, because I didn't know contractors were supposed to act differently. But it's because I care. It's because I love what I do, and I want great product out there. Because even as a contractor, guess what? My name's still tied to that. That shit goes all awry. They're still gonna be like, yeah, that fucking contractor Joe, that loud guy that drank pots and pots of coffee, that's his fault. I avoid that at all costs because I'm gonna put in what I have to get things done. So on that, do we have any other questions, or comments, or ideas, or anybody want to vent? Tell me what happened today. The silence is deafening. I could still talk. Watch out.
I guess I do have a question, actually. I'm going to go ahead and out myself. I am from a boot camp. And while I understand when you say, you know, be the master of UX, like, don't, you know, stay in your lane. In the name of having efficient communication with developers, is it not also important to have an understanding of coding as well? Or where does that line end?
I always use the term functional. Like, what's the analogy I always use? It's always food, because naturally, I know how a recipe is made, but I don't have to know how the pasta's like made. I could make a straight up recipe, give me some rinsoni, throw that shit in a pot, call it a day, but I don't need to know the process of getting it to me. Functional knowledge, I think, is a key part. That's why I said, going back to that like design system thing, it's the atomic design is basically a lesson in how React components are built. And I think it's such a great thing to know. And I have had moments where I'm like, oh, I'll just write, can I update that CSS for you? And they're just like, yo, get back, step away. Like, but like, I could just, no, don't do it. Because also I think it is like, if you want to learn both, it's great. I always encourage people to learn as much as you can, but don't, like, if your job is a UX designer, work on the UX and understand how you're building components correctly. I think that's where the line is. Trust me, we have a lot of shit to learn anyway. Every day there's new technology. I mainly got that new iPhone just so I could play with the AR LiDAR sensor, which is kind of true. Also, I want a new phone. But like, because now it's about like these immersive things. Like, that's another thing. So now our industry is changing to VR and AR and all this other stuff that we can play with, this toolbox we could play with. I realized I don't have a clue how any of it's built. I was playing in Adobe Arrow the other day. Arrow, I don't know. I know I'm saying it wrong because of the accent. But like working a 3D space and putting stuff in there and like now I'm like, but is this right? Is this like, how am I going to hand that off to a developer? Like, what am I going to do? I'm like, they're going to basically get some cryptic ass file from Adobe Arrow from me and maybe a hand drawing. Like, I don't know. I guess I can still build it in Sketch and Figma as like the components that go around it, but it's like how, man, every day something new. But it's exciting. Like, think about it. Like, we're in this sandbox and it keeps getting larger. We have so much stuff to play with and we get the ability to do it. Like I joke a lot about how titling is in UX because I think it's hilarious. But like, when you start developing product and you're a product designer or whatever the hell we call ourselves, like, how far can you push our devices that we're putting them on? And then one of the best conversations I had recently was, we're working in international markets. And I said, this works great in the US, but do we think they have like a gigabit internet in like the middle of nowhere in Malaysia? Like, how are they actually downloading what we're creating? Like, our reach has now become so wide and we have to always be conscious of how we're building, which was the poor developer worked super hard on this and it came back and I'm like, oh man, all these international markets look amazing. It loads a little slow. It loads a little slow on my internet. What do you think is going to happen on like an overseas interaction? And he was like, oh man, good idea. We should really look into that. So I think these are also little things that come up in our process that are hiccups. And we have to, again, as a team, me and him, like, tried to emulate like international data speeds, which was fascinating because we are very, 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 very USA about data. Like, we will download the shit out of stuff. We were like, oh, 5G, I could download an entire Netflix series today. But that's here, and 5G is only on like 3 street corners in Manhattan. So it's like, we have to be conscious of everything. I think it's a fun and beautiful part of our job. Oh, and Alyssa, my favorite beer is actually a local brewery, which I did not have any here because I didn't have a chance to go, and I'm drinking Sam Adams because I'm staying local with the East Coast. And for all the people from Boston, Sam Adams, Boston for beer.
Thank you. We appreciate your patronage.
Nice. I'm drinking Switchback, and I don't have my camera on because I'm kind of in the dark.
Oh yeah, Alyssa's actually up in the Boston area.
Correction, I'm in Vermont right now, but I am usually in the Boston area.
So yeah, how's everybody else feeling now? I know we got a whole bunch of stuff going on in chat, which I love. One of the things I gotta say thank you to you guys for being so active in the chat, because a lot of what I'm hearing from people is it's hard to interact with other designers during COVID. So during these times, you guys are now talking to each other and supporting each other, and it is fucking delightful. Like, I'm trying to read and stay engaged in the conversation with you guys, but I think this is great. And I know a lot of people, you know, anybody who's actually did like a mentoring session with me or talk to me, I've said many times to a lot of you guys that, like, I am so jealous of the moment you guys get into UX. You guys are getting into it now. You guys are going to these boot camps where you work with other people and you learn a bunch of stuff, and much like in regular college, once you get in the real world, none of it matters. But you guys are coming in at such an interesting time. You know, it's not just COVID and all that bullshit, because that's going to change everything, obviously, but creating experiences, like, all of our jobs is to create stuff for people. You all make conscious efforts, unselfishly saying, I'm going to build something for the masses. I'm going to put my efforts into somebody else's priorities. And I think it's so cool, because for 20 years I've been doing this, and it's always been thought of a little oddly that I'd be like, who's this for? What are they going to do with it? Is this going to be beneficial to them? I don't know. Ages 18 to 24 males, that's who we're building this for. Please be a little more vague. You know, like, now you guys have data, you guys understand, and at this moment, you guys are already coming in after the point where people were just like, data is everything. No, that is a guiding force for us. There are people who live and die by building experiences just for data. But you guys are coming into that moment where we know that data is going to influence our decisions and not be the Bible for our decisions. So, nostalgic, get a little weepy, granola, crunchy, but fluffy. But it's true though, like, and I want you guys always to, every moment that you're working and you're doing what you love, and you came into this job with so much passion, remember that you're doing it for someone. And it's not easy sometimes, because especially with how our lives are now, our skew of UX sometimes, our own view of it, sometimes teeters. But we always have to remember to take ourselves out of it. Unless we're the demographic, then totally throw yourself in there. But always be curious. Always look at experiences and ask why. We had the conversation about Big Sur at the top. My favorite conversation also now is around Apple is iOS 14. We give you guys widgets. Awesome. Fucking great. I can't wait. Can't wait to pollute my screen with giant boxes. But, and I'm not gonna lie that they're all over the place, but the probability of what's gonna happen to our users. Our phones are muscle memory. you know how many times when I was running iOS 14 as a beta, because I was like testing apps and shit, I opened up my weather app because I put it where my messages were, and annoyed every time. So I was like, again, this is a hypothesis. There's UX people that work for these companies that say, we're going to try this. We're going to try to get people used to something new. You know, we're going to get them thinking and using their devices differently. A device they use every day, countlessly. We gave them a timer so they can easily know that they spend 11 hours on the phone every day. Unless the 11 hours is just me. Quarantine. But you know what I mean? Like, these are the behaviors that we get to think through. We do have an opportunity to flex. We do have an opportunity to say, our users are so used to this. What happens if we throw something new in? Look at all the outrage over Instagram putting shopping in where the like button was. Granted, not a big fan, but then as a UX person, I'm like, I wonder why they did that to us. Like, what was the purpose? What did they see? Oh yes, and Twitter fleets, by the way. Poor Snapchat came up with a great feature and now everybody has officially stolen it. And they didn't even patent it or anything. But you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. You look at these experiences and start to go backwards. Like, what's the hypothesis that they said that shopping was more important? We're in a pandemic. Shopping is up. Online shopping is up. Putting that to the forefront makes the most sense. Is it annoying because I keep opening up the shopping channel when I'm trying to see who likes my photos because I'm vain as shit? Yes, absolutely. But that's the thing, is there's a reason for it. My reason might not even be right. I could just be guessing. That was my guess when I saw it. I was like, fuck the pandemic, everybody shopping. It's gotta be there now. And if anybody who's accidentally live streamed with this new UX, did that once, never doing it again. You know what I mean? Like, but there's a reason. And that's our job, is to question. Our job is to look and question and think and learn from everything.